All right. Yeah, we're not on the same page. All right. Let's do one more round of names because we have some new folks here. I knew both to the church and to our gathering. So I'm Shay.
Danette.
Well,
I'm Ellen.
I'm Bruce.
Kay. Mary.
Serenity.
Sandra.
Mary.
Terry.
Catherine.
Justin.
Lee.
Paul.
Beth. Patty.
Leslie. All right. Let's get rolling tonight.
And Justin Perry.
Yeah.
I gotta take you with me everywhere I go, Patty. Yeah, I'll walk out. All right. So in our series tonight, we've been kind of going piece by piece with this because one of the things we said was we want to kind of evolve in how we go about these conversations. And today the theme is going to be managing our emotions, because one of the things we know is that our emotions are a large part of sometimes why we don't engage these conversations, but also sometimes why we have a hard time executing them when we attempt to do it. Right?
Is it working for you? Make sure the chair.
It's all right.
Let me make sure the chair isn't obstructing
I would say it's kind of like when I'm at home and trying to get
the TV's controller
the right angle
to work.
And then
All
one
right.
of your children grabs the remote from you.
Yeah.
Right? You're too old to use the remote.
No, my children know better. They know better to do that. Yeah.
Are you pressing that arrow? Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. All right.
Let's try.
Let's try turning it off and back on again. If that doesn't work, I will be your
Let's try this.
I'll be your clicker.
All right,
Your
I'll say it. Let me-
oh wait. Oh,
I
there we go.
I went with the turn it off, turn it on thing. There we go.
That works a lot.
Back. Yes, exactly. All right, so let me make sure we're good. Am I lined up?
Is it still not working? Okay.
Yeah, Shay.
I broke it, man.
It's all good.
One more time. All right. I will be your clicker for now. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that's good. I was
All
gonna
right.
say-
You want to start here?
I was gonna say, since everybody wasn't here for the historical
Yeah.
piece, I was gonna say you could be my indentured servant tonight, but everybody may not get that joke, but they weren't here last week, though. So, all right, so last week we talked about history, so for the folks that weren't here. All right, so again, one of the things that we set out with these conversations is we operate on a unified set of assumptions. The first one is that we all believe that people's demographics should not faith into negative outcomes, right? The second thing, which is again ties in directly what we're talking about today, is that crucial conversations are often uncomfortable. The third thing is, and again, why we're taking the approach that we're taking, is that creating discomfort without also providing effective strategies to navigate that discomfort is not productive. And then the last one that we said that was really important for folks in here to really lean into is that in attempting to execute these crucial conversations, we will make mistakes. I didn't say we might make mistakes, I said we will. All right, all right, on to the next one. Oh, man. So I got Patty on my staff, now I got Shay. All right.
You're welcome.
So some other agreements and the covenant that we're operating under here is that we want to create what we call brave spaces to discuss, exchange, learn, and to be vulnerable in this. All right. We want to speak truth with integrity. All right. And we want to resist sarcasm and trolling. That doesn't mean we don't joke in here. Obviously, I've already done that. But when we're actually having these conversations, they're sensitive topics, right? And so it's not necessarily the space to troll somebody and to see if we can get a rise out of them, if that makes sense at all. Right? Third, when we talk about discomfort, one of the things we want to do is we want to lean into that discomfort, not run from it, not hide from it. We want to lean into it, but we also want to lean into each other for support as we go through this. Fourth, we want to commit to non-closure. All right. The reality is that the divisions that we're experiencing have been built over time, over centuries, over millenniums. All right. I have to name that. Again, it's not a new phenomenon. It may be new to some of our awareness, but it's not new, period. Okay. And so working through this will take time as well. And so when we talk about that taking time, it doesn't mean we don't operate with urgency, but it also means that we realize that it's going to take a commitment. And just because we don't get what we want with one attempt doesn't mean we just quit. Right? Next, we want to assume positive intent while practicing compassionate accountability. Again, I say it all the time, the divisions that we see, the reality that is our world, we may not have created it all, but the reality is we've inherited it, right? Separately, at some point in our lives, most of us have had some form of, there's bigotry, missteps, or whatever else like that. When we talk about compassion and accountability, what it's saying is that I'm owning the fact that at some point in my life I've been wrong, but as I learn new information, I'm committed to doing the next right thing moving forward, right? It's not about labeling myself with any kind of permanent letter. It's about saying, I recognize this is something I want to improve, and I'm committed to the work it takes to make that happen. And then the last thing is we want to seek intentional learning about topics. In the same way that we do Google searches for everything else, when something breaks in our house, and I break it worse after my Google search, right? You know, we still want to continue doing research. We want to accept that things are going to progress over time, right? The reality that my grandparents saw, that my parents saw, versus what I saw, what my kids saw, there, some things will be similar, but some things will be different. And I got to be open to that reality.
All right.
I'm
Yeah,
still
man.
instinctively doing it. So,
Here,
yeah.
just throw
No,
it to
no,
me.
no, I feel like I'm directing you when I.
Yeah, it's good. I actually felt a little jolt
Yeah.
when you clicked at me. I'm wearing a shot collar. So each week we've started with scripture, and today I wanted to start with this book, How Your 21st Century Church Family Works by Steinke. It's actually an older book that they revamped for our current moment in basically integrating family systems theory and thinking about our church family as a sort of, as a system, as a whole made of interrelated parts. One body, many members, right? Paul says. So this is a fun little thing here from, it's called The Lesson, that Steinke quotes in his book. And what I love about this is it's in a portion of the book where he's talking about our brains and what people call our triune brain, not the triune God, but the triune brain, in that we have sort of the reptile brain, and then we have a sort of a mammalian or mammal brain, and then we have a neocortex, right? These are sort of, this is how some psychiatrists talk about the brain. And so in talking about how we can become reactive and our reptilian brains are activated, and particularly as it relates to conflict, this is a little bit from the Sermon on the Mount that demonstrates this, okay? So this is gonna sound familiar until it doesn't. So, then Jesus took his disciples up the mountain and gathered them around him. He taught them, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, blessed are they that mourn. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are they that thirst for justice. Blessed are you when persecuted. Blessed are you when you suffer. Be glad and rejoice, for great is your reward in heaven." Then Simon Peter said, "Are we supposed to know this?" And Andrew says, "Do I have to write this down?" Then Jesus took his disciples up on the mountain, and gathering them around him, he taught them, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom," right? Keep going. This is the same thing twice. So just imagine that his other disciples, I think there was a problem with the pace here. But basically, you've seen the meme of Jesus doing this, and the people are, and he's saying, love your neighbors, right, as yourself. And you've seen the little thought bubbles that are like, what about this? And he's like, really? And so that's sort of the place that we react instead of really thoughtfully responding, because what Jesus invites us to do is not easy. Loving your neighbor as yourself might be easy if you have good neighbors, or what you consider good neighbors. It's much harder to love your bad neighbors, or the neighbors that you can't seem to get along with. It's even harder to love your enemies. I heard someone say the other day, "Who would Jesus bomb?" And that hit me like hit me right in the gut as I think about what enemy love looks like. So with that said, I will update this slide as we put together our resources for the end of our series, so that you can have the full list of all the disciples' silly things that they say. one of them says, is there gonna be a test? Which I think is great. Well, why don't we pray and then we'll get started. God, thank you for these folks in here, this group, this time. Thank you for a church that allows us to think about and to grow into practicing crucial conversations in a world that seems and feels so polarized. Help us. Open our hearts, soften them, open our minds. May they hear and learn and take in so that we can seek to better love you and better love our neighbors as ourselves and better love even our enemies. It's super hard. Give us the gift of humor, the gift of grace, knowing that it isn't all on us. And we are invited to pick up our cross and follow you into difficult places, into difficult conversations, into difficult moments, such as the one we now find ourselves. So help us. We thank you that you're here, your presence is with us, and we ask that your Spirit leads us into all truth in our conversations. In the Son's name we pray, amen. Oh, it worked.
Too many times. All right, good.
Okay.
So this is a brief summary of what we talked about last week, but it kind of gives a framework. And so, you know, one of the things when we talked about was our path of history, and again, history even before this was an actual nation. You know, history of coming to this land for Europeans, history of being brought to this land for Africans, history of being in this land originally for indigenous folks, right? But once there became a lot of intermingling, very briefly, I'll tell y'all there was a thing called Bacon's Rebellion that we talked about. And what happened was the indentured servants, the Europeans and the Africans both realized they were doing all of the work, but the crown in England was extracting all of the money, getting all the resources, the elite. And so they had what was a rebellion. One of the Europeans named Bacon helped lead this rebellion. And afterwards, the elite recognized that they were outnumbered. And so they had to figure out how were they going to maintain the system that had people work and produce resources for them while still being able to maintain the overwhelming majority of the profit. And so what they did was they had to come up with a way to divide. And they tried religion, they tried language, they tried different things, and they stumbled upon race. And what they did with that was they helped convince the Europeans who looked more like them that they were closer to the elite than they were to the Africans. And so in doing that, they allowed the now white people, that was where whiteness came into play. And white was originally not defined as what it was defined as what it was not. White was defined as not Black. And that's an important thing to recognize because again, it still exists right now, right? And so that began the division. They allowed the working class white folks who were indentured servants to still get exploited, but also to have a little bit more power than the Africans who would never become free, who could never own any kind of wealth and everything else like that. Again, that's a very, very, very small summary, but just catching us up because it's important to recognize how these things have been reproduced over and over and over. And so what we show is that the laws that were created to advance the interest of white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, male landowners. So again, white being race, Anglo-Saxon dealing with nationality and ethnicity, Protestant dealing with religion, male dealing with gender and sexual orientation, right? And landowner dealing with class, right? And it's important to recognize that again, what has been defined as white has evolved over time based on the need. When it's primarily European, We could discriminate against Irish, against the German, against the Italians, or whatever else like that. But once there were more black folks and brown folks and things like that, again, brown's the term we use, then all of a sudden those folks got rolled up into becoming white. And you see little shifts like changing the way I spell my last name and things like that. Are y'all still following?
And you've probably heard her sing Wasp. That's waspy, wasp. They're not talking about an insect.
Right. And that's the thing. So we talk about WASP culture, right? And so again, that's the standard. So even when people, the term whiteness and things like that is very often speaking about upper middle class, right? And so again, you've got the religion. Notice it says Protestant. It doesn't say Christian at first, because at first we were still going against the Catholics. But once we started having other religions showing up, it's like, okay, well, all right, Catholics, y'all gotta join us with Christians. Are y'all following that? So, and then we go into male. So we go into gender, we go into sexual orientation, all those things like that. Again, who can have power? But the last one on here is very important. Landowner. And landowner doesn't mean me with my mortgage with South State Bank. Landowner means the actual elite. So whether we're talking about the Rockefellers, whether we're talking about the Zuckerbergs or whatever else like that, it's the same thing. Are y'all following? But the thing that's tricky about this is for a lot of people who check a good amount of the boxes, they are convinced that they are a part of that elite group. All right, so again, so lots of times when you see white men that may check all of these other boxes, well, I'm almost there, but in the end, they couldn't actually get public education. There was actually no such thing as public education until the end of slavery. Because once the slaves had the right to get education, now people who were poor and working, who worked the farms and everything else, now they were getting the right to education. And so you see that kind of stuff with a lot of the advancements of the middle class throughout, right? And so basically it's important to recognize all those things, because when we see what's happening here, now we hear people talking about immigrants, but specific types of immigrants, right? When we talk about all the things with trans people, well, it's tied into gender, right? So again, whether it was the realities of what women could do, or now whether it's a focus on trans and things like that, it's tied into this, all right? Religion. Again, we see this in terms of not only the wars, who gets threatened to get banned, all of these types of things, right? But again, the important thing to recognize is that all of these things, race, I want to say this about the race and the ethnicity piece. I remember in 2000, I was home from college and I got a job that paid $13.25 an hour, which was crazy back then, as a census enumerator, right? And I remember that was like one of the first epiphanies I had, but I still didn't fully get it. But like, so going, and a lot of the people that I was trying to get the census on were people who were largely Latino. But there was a space that had said Hispanic and things like that, but there was also something that said race. So that wasn't the race. You still had white, black, things like that. So when we say things like brown people, that's something we use to help us organize, but a lot of folks who are Latino identify either as white or black, or it may depend on the situation they're in. Are y'all following that? So I just said, which again, going back to what happened with the Italians, what happened with the Germans. So again, it's the same thing happening, just with a different set of immigrants now. All right. So last thing I'll say on there is it's important to recognize that everybody can face oppression, right? That said, the less amount of those boxes you check off in the winning category, the more hurdles you may have to go over, right? And so when we talk about intersectionality, it's recognizing that there are challenges that I may experience as a Black man, but also it may be different than Serenity may experience as a Black woman, right? There's experiences that Catherine, so again, we talk about women's suffrage, right? Women getting the right to vote with the 19th Amendment. Well, it was white women that got the right to vote. Black women didn't get the right to vote until the 1960s with the Civil Rights Movement. because we weren't looking at it through an intersectional lens. Does that make sense? And even when it doesn't, y'all can always tell me. All right, I'll zap you again.
Zap. I do. I like a good zap.
Yeah. All right, so question for you all right? What are some common emotions that we connect with these crucial conversations?
Discomfort.
Discomfort, rage, frustration,
Fear,
care,
fear,
fear, yeah,
Embarrassment.
embarrassment, guilt, anger,
shame.
shame. All right, good. No, these are all good, and we're gonna come back to a lot of them. So when you get the slides, you'll be able to appreciate these cute little faces and everything on the
Yeah.
morning. You can see
I
it
get
here,
that.
right?
Little purple
Yeah.
emojis.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So again, some things we named right there is fear, right? That concern of threat, the concern of judgment, you know, the concern of being disliked, fear of lost status, right? Anger. You know, and I always say, especially when we tie things to trauma and to safety concerns. You know, as somebody, you know, I work as a therapist. I've worked with people with trauma now for 20 plus years. Anger is a symptom very often of PTSD, trauma, right? And I always think it's important to name, because one of the challenges we run into is that when there are people who are experiencing some of the pain of the things that happen or policies that happen, we say things like, well, I'd hear you if you weren't so angry, right? And one of the things I say is that I worked as the only man on the unit of adolescent, pre-adolescent girls, residential unit for 3 years when I was in grad school, but eventually after grad school, for a few years, I ran a women's group for women with mental health and substance use challenges. And throughout both of those experiences, a lot of the girls and the women I worked with had a lot of trauma that was with men, right? And when I ran those groups, you know what I never said at any point in that? Ladies, I could hear you a little bit better if you weren't so angry. How do y'all think that would have played out? Right, right. And yet sometimes when we're talking to people of color, when we're talking to folks that are LGBTQ or whatever else, and they're speaking through their it's like, if you guys weren't so angry, we would hear you. Y'all following that?
Yeah.
Okay. So anxiety. A lot of times it's just a worry. Sometimes it's anxiety about the anticipation of even starting this conversation, right? I'm worried about saying the right thing, saying the perfect thing, definitely not saying the wrong thing. Frustration. Sometimes it's just exhausting having the same conversation. Didn't we deal with this back? We were, a lot of folks know that my dad, passed away recently, and we had his funeral on Monday, and he and my mom were a part of desegregation of schools in Winston-Salem in high school at that point. And then he played basketball at Catawba from 1969 to 72, where there were 12 Black kids on the entire campus. So again, desegregation right there in Salisbury. Right. And so but there's conversations that, and there were people who came, it was young, beautiful, that came and spoke and everything else and talked about their own experiences then. But then also talking about seeing things that they're seeing now that remind them of things, right? So sometimes that could be a frustrating thing. Sure. Confusion. Sometimes it feels like there can be like cognitive dissonance between what I know of somebody in all these other ways versus perspectives. All of a sudden I hear this like, oh, that's different. You and me, we're here, but then you're saying this, wow. And they may say, well, yeah, but we don't mean you. But that in itself can provoke different emotions, right? Sadness. I always have the name sadness. There's sometimes a level of grief. It's kind of like as a kid when you find out Santa Claus is not real, Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I wouldn't do it in front of my daughter. Oh, this is being recorded, all right. Just kidding. Yeah.
The gift of a crucial
I
conversation.
know, I was like, that's a whole different crucial conversation. It's okay, yeah. Just let somebody with older siblings just spoil it and everything else. But honestly, lots of times when we start having these conversations, even about the history of our country, what I find is for a lot of folks, it's like finding out that Santa's not real. Are you saying this happened? Well, I know it. They did this kind of stuff in Germany, but not here. It's like, well, we got a blueprint in Germany. Like, they literally used Jim Crow as their blueprint, but they actually said that we went too far with the one drop rule. But again, those are not conversations that we often have, and when it hits, it's just like, whoa. Sadness, right? Hurt. It hurts. Sometimes these things hurt. Sometimes it's people we love, people we know, people we care about, right? People we've been in community with. And so it's this weird kind of thing where I've got all of these kinds of feeling caught off guard. It can hurt. And lastly, the important one is defensiveness. Defensiveness is often the part of these conversations. And the thing is, it's defensiveness for everybody across the board. Sometimes it's me protecting my identity, me protecting my perception of myself, me feeling like you're judging me, labeling me, or whatever else like that. Me sometimes thinking I'm further along than you're making me out to be, whatever. There's a lot of things that we get defensive about. I feel attacked, right? I'm only using Catherine because I know I can feel comfortable. This is also why people don't sit near one of the facilitators very often too. So people go to like back of the room and everything. You know what? I should actually go to people furthest away so I don't reinforce that, right? But again, we run into the space of like, I'm a good Christian, right? I have to say that in our space, and for you to say that I'm messed up this way is I feel like you're telling me I'm not a good person. I'm not a good Christian. Well, I'm not a good man. I'm not a good white person. I'm all of these things, right? And when you're saying something that makes me think that I made an error, sometimes that feels like you're attacking me and the foundation of who I see in myself as.
That puts the preacher in a pretty tough spot, but.
Hey, yeah. Hey, that's the nature of the preacher, right?
Justin doesn't feel bad for the preachers. That's their job.
Yeah, it's like, what is it about afflicting? Okay, right.
I also think that fear of failure keeps us from wanting to try to have these types of conversations. It can be a great way of sort of taking you out of that place. And I think that's what's so important about saying, we're gonna get it wrong.
100%.
We're gonna I'm gonna say the wrong word. I'm gonna, and the goal is to keep learning through that. But if we're scared that, if we're to look like a failure or to have our worth or our honor or whatever, if we're, ashamed, then it forecloses any possible, growth into crucial conversations.
Absolutely. It's the same thing we see with kids, right? Like, I would rather look like the cool kid in school who doesn't care about things than the one who really doesn't know what we're doing. Nah, man, this is lame, man. Why are y'all worried about this math? No idea what's going on, right? But one of those looks cooler, right? Or at least feels, I could at least be in more denial that way, right? And that's part of like what Shay just said was very important there. One of the reasons why I like to own the fact that, again, I've said homophobic things, I've said sexist things, I've said xenophobic things, I've said bigoted things, all these kinds of things. I own that because it's important for me to model what I'm attempting to help us do. And it's saying that, okay, yes, I can own what I did then, but I can commit to doing different things now at this stage of my life. It doesn't erase what I did, but it's saying that I can grow from it and show up differently at this point, right? So next question for you all. What are some other emotions that you've experienced in the past during crucial conversations?
Shock.
Shock. It's a great one.
Sometimes hopelessness. I mean, that's just a human form of frustration, I think. It's like, this is a waste of time because
Yeah, yeah,
somebody's not wrong.
yeah. Hopelessness, yeah, definitely. What'd you say? Yeah. Absolutely. No, both of those are great.
Embarrassment.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Debilitated, just worn out,
Yeah,
shamed in the ground.
yeah, yeah,
It's
Just-
worthless.
yeah.
Sometimes disbelief that the person you're talking to just said what they just said,
Yeah.
or believes what they just said.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. That shocking disbelief can go right in, right? Right? Absolutely.
Maya Angelou has this great quote: "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better."
And that's the fundamental thing right there, right? The next right thing.
Yeah.
So, no, but before reading it, sorry. Don't cheat. Again, I'm already looking, I can't turn away. No. Sorry, yeah, no.
I thought
Yeah.
it was a phantom shot.
No,
It was a phantom
It was me,
shot.
that was on me, yeah. I
Okay.
was like, yeah, no, it worked. So what's the difference between shame and guilt? People often use these words interchangeably, but they're not the same. What's the difference?
I think maybe shame's more personal.
Like it. Cool, what else?
Shame is looking at how other people see you, whereas guilt, maybe how you feel about your own actions.
Okay. Mhm. What is next? All right.
I think
Oh,
guilt is something that you are taking a responsibility that you did something, whereas that may not necessarily be a part of the shame that you're
Right.
responsible, but
Guilt is like an action.
yeah, guilt is, oh, I did this terrible thing.
Or didn't do something.
Or didn't do something, yeah.
no.
And shame is,
I feel the way, yeah.
Yeah.
Good work, team. Good
Ontological.
work there. We good. So, no, I yes. No, you're deep.
I'm a
deep.
plant.
I love it. I need a plan. I always need a plan. Look, if you do this kind of stuff, you always keep a plan, you know, just in case. You know, I got at least one friend in the room. All right. Yeah. Showing up on my own. Yeah. So exactly. So with guilt, simply put, is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I screwed up. Shame is I am screwed up. Y'all hear the difference between the two of those? So again, like shame is like a core feeling of almost how I'm defining myself. Whereas guilt, give me your name again. I'm terrible with names.
Danette,
Danette.
you don't run into it very often.
But I know two other Danettes. So
You're
yeah.
kidding.
Wow. I'm gonna get greedy and try. How do you spell it? It's not
D-A-N-E.
D-A-N-E-T-T-E. Yeah, see, I know two other Danettes. We're good. All right.
Hey, you might have to introduce them.
I was gonna say,
Have a Danette club.
we're created Danette party. One, I don't know if she still is in Charlotte. I know she was at least in Charlotte at some point. I'll find out. I'm gonna find out just Danette McLaurin. So I'm gonna do that just because.
She's in Atlanta.
See, there you
We
go.
went to
She's another
school
West
together.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. So see that now I've got verifications. Patty again helping me out. Yeah. So if I go over and accidentally step on Danette's shoe with guilt, again, I can take responsibility for that. Like there's ways that guilt can be appropriate. And I can say, oh man, I'm sorry. Let me get a paper towel and we'll help clean the shoe off. All right, so when we talk about compassionate accountability, right? It's saying I messed up and now let me get a chance to try to reconcile this, right? With shame, that core feeling Shame is never progressive. Guilt can be inappropriate at times. Like if I was telling Shay, the example I gave was like, if I felt guilty because I didn't call my dad one last time before he died or something like that, right? I didn't actually have any effect on his death. That's actually inappropriate guilt, all right? Now, with shame, I don't find an actual appropriate form of shame, right? So, and I'll show you why in a second, so. Whoa, did it actually work?
I didn't touch it, so.
This actually is like my remote at home.
Is it-
So sporadic, yeah.
Well, I wonder if you're like, maybe we're a little out of
I'll say,
range. I
it's
don't
my,
know.
it's my aim, yeah, I don't know.
One inch closer.
Yeah, I gotta find my one spot that I,
And don't.
yeah, exactly. Being that my wife talks about my pacing, that's not gonna work. All right. So with shame, it leads us to do any combination of these four things. Shame can lead me to avoid. Shame can lead me to attack myself. Shame can lead me to attack others. The shame can lead me to withdraw. So, trick question. Which of those is a healthy option? I said, I gave you a hint when I said trick question. Right? Right, yes, all of the above. This is not the top for all of the above, right? So again, but this is also why, like when it comes to a lot of these conversations, like people, use the term, well, actually, before I do that, I'm gonna break down each of those things. So when I think about avoiding is I just simply try to stay away. And the thing is, if there's a cancer, I don't have to face the cancer for the cancer to grow and take me out, right? I can avoid it as much as I want to, but in the end, eventually it's gonna hit stage 4 and that's gonna be the end, right? Attacking myself, right? Such an idiot, can't do anything right. Such a screw up, right? All kinds of ways that we talk bad about ourselves. There's actual self-harm things, cutting, the way we do disordered eating. Go ahead.
The shame and psychosis then?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'll come back to that. Say, no, that's a good question. That's a good question. I even think about when we talk about getting drunk and getting high. Think of the way we describe it. Getting smashed, get obliterated, get hammered, get wasted, get blanked up. If I didn't know any better, I think somebody got their butt kicked. And the truth is, I kicked my own butt, right? I got upset with Ellen, but because I wasn't secure enough to say anything, I went home and crushed a fifth of vodka. And now I'm throwing up in my toilet while she's at home watching Netflix. Ooh, I really hurt Ellen, right? Attacking myself, attacking others. I always say the way you can tell the difference between genuine confidence versus arrogance masquerading as confidence is does the person try to lift others up, or do they try to tear others down? Do they try to create a bigger pie for everybody, or do they try to shrink the pie for themselves, right? Because if I have genuine confidence, what I recognize is there's space for us all to shine and thrive. But when I have arrogance masquerading as confidence, I need you to look really small so you don't realize I'm not as big as I'm pretending to be. Right? And lastly, withdrawal, disconnect completely. In my field, the biggest one is obviously suicide. And one of the things I named with the withdrawal piece, especially when I have to go back to men, and so when I say that totem pole, that hierarchy I said earlier is bad for everybody, the number one population who dies by suicide is men. If you get more specific, then it goes to white men. If you go even more specific, it's white men in middle age, right? But also, if you think about who gets the messages that I can do it all on my own, no one hears that more. Nobody believes that myth more. And it works until it doesn't work. Following that? And so when I talked about how it will harm everybody, that's kind of what I'm saying. Lastly, we often use the term white guilt. People use that term. And I think it's a misused term. I think our nation is one of white shame. We avoid being honest about our history. sometimes when people hear these things, that people like attack themselves, somebody like, this makes me feel ashamed to be white. I'm like, that's not the goal. This is not the goal. I found out that my family owned slaves and everything else, and now I'm ashamed of myself. Again, it's not the goal. Right? Attacking others. You guys are being divisive, bringing this stuff up. You're a troublemaker. You're a race baiter. You're playing the race card. You know, however you're doing, these women are just kind of right? We attack folks.
Call the police.
Call the police. Right? Martin Luther King, you know, we like to pretend like we celebrate him. But again, he was assassinated. Like, that's how deep the shame was. And the crazy thing was, again, not only was he talking about race relations, he was actually talking about economically, hey, poor white folks, you're getting messed up by this system as well. Are y'all following
And
that?
that's where they killed him.
Well, yeah, right, yeah,
In Vietnam.
Yeah.
Something like that.
right, right,
Across the line.
right. So that's how deep it is. And then the withdrawal. The withdrawal is even when we do things like, and this is gonna be an uncomfortable thing, is like, even when we say like we're colorblind, right? But think about this. Some of us have young kids who were in preschool and spent the year learning all these colors. So you're telling me at 3, you learned all these colors, 23, 53, 73, all of a sudden now you don't see color anymore? The issue is not seeing color. The issue is assigning value based on those differences, right? It's okay to recognize the difference. It's okay for me to recognize somebody's immigrant status, me to recognize their gender. And we can still embrace and love each other in that world. Oh.
Don't preach it.
Good fluke. Oh, okay. So I want you all to, with your partner, so turn to your neighbor. This is my Amy Zion mode right now for a second.
Touch your neighbor.
All right. No, I didn't say touch your neighbor. I know that the Presbyterian won't do that. I say turn to them. All right. I'm not gonna get greedy. All right. And I want you to just talk about these couple of questions. All right. So what are the emotions you find most difficult to manage during crucial conversations? And which ones prevent you from engaging in crucial conversations to begin with? So I want you to think about yourself. I don't want you to talk about other people. This is about self-examination right now. All right. So you can work in groups of 3 if that's easy, you know. And you can work in pairs, whatever works. It's okay, y'all can work in pairs, y'all. Whatever works for you all.
Especially because a lot of those conversations. And I think the second question, when it comes to, when it feels like it's not. Yes.
It's pretty simple.
Yes. So, I'm sure you are.
Well, I think I'm wrong. Way tired, I'm still. Basically a very happy person. Looking like the perspective of others. Some lady, that's very hard. So I'm not. Basically, very quiet person. I like to be very quiet. That probably prevents me from engaging in Christian conversations. I get embarrassed really easily. A lot of my job
Outward.
I mean, I'll stay up to 3 or 4 in the morning drawing. You want to time to come out. It's not like a big part. I mean, my mother used to say when I was a kid, you're chatty Cathy.
Many of them
I like
People don't realize that I like to spend time out with my first husband. I get paid to exercise. What I like about it, I don't have to
Yeah, that's a.
Yeah. And, you know,
They have their. Well, I think they just have personal, just probably left alone. Maybe that was, I can't remember. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Kind of just. Also fun.
yeah, that shows how, I think real fast. I'll be thinking where I need to say this to me. My best friend told me one time, she said, "Well, you guys keep on saying you're very, you interrupt your mind. It's because you think so fast. You're very blunt. Which I am.
It was nice chatting with you. We'll go back over here and get ready for the next slide.
All right. Finish your last call. Finish your last call. Yeah. I realized I'm looking at that, I'm just a couple minutes behind. You know, it's like, yeah, no, I'm sorry. They got-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Line.
Set me up, man. Yeah, set me up. All right. So, does anybody feel comfortable sharing, anything that came out of your conversations? Yeah.
Well, we talked about a lot of things, but I think Ellen said something that was critical. So we were talking about, lots of respect, fear, whatever, and getting in those conversations. But then she said, but it's because we haven't had them. That's where we are right now, so we gotta kind of remember that.
Yeah. Good.
Or if we have had them, you have earned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You got earned and you left it feeling,
Yeah.
dejected, helpless. So what we were talking about, I realized Catherine's got all the answers anyway, so I had.
That's why I brought her here.
That's a good back. So a lot of these are, we're trying to say, helplessness, fear, so forth. It's just so intertwined. They all can come into play in one simple conversation.
No doubt.
So.
No doubt. Definitely.
And this
we didn't talk about this, but, this came out in a Sunday school class many years ago that, you know, our generation watched a little bit of TV. And it seemed like that in some of the shows that we would watch, they would put down each other. And then you would hear laughing in the background. And so we grew up hearing that and seeing that model and seeing people getting a lot of good attention for not being nice to each other.
Sure. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, well, and that's still a dance, right? And I think one of the things that's important is like figuring out when those jokes can be done in love with people versus when it's done at people's expense, right? Because there's ways like there's some of our friends that we got together again, all my dad's service, we've known each other forever. We poke with each other. And we also know that there's a line that we don't go to either, right? And sometimes, but in this place, that's not what's happening. And honestly, there's a lot of energy that's mobilized on triggering other folks and laughing at it.
Right? Also on that, like, I don't know how to explain this well, but like, there's this comfort level for me. Like, I recognize that in my life, I've been made to feel uncomfortable. And in certain situations, I own that. And I don't want to put the burden on someone else feeling uncomfortable. So I will eat the whatever the negative thing that is said so that I don't make you uncomfortable because I'm used to feeling uncomfortable. I can handle it. And I don't really want that falls into that.
So well, when we talk about trauma responses, so there's fight, flight, which people know, and there's freeze, which is shut down, but the other is fawn. And fawn is where we accommodate those that are aligned sometimes with the trauma and help them feel comfortable and hoping that it will reduce the amount of trauma that comes afterwards. Right? All right, I'm gonna go and I'll take us out, put it quickly and everything. I said, this clock has misled me over here. It's been off by a couple of minutes. And again, I know every Presbyterian minute is precious. So, all right. So 5 questions to ask before initiating a crucial conversation. This is an important part of the thing. The first thing is what is the other person feeling right now? Read the room, right? It's like I was telling Shay, like it's like for me as somebody who's married, if my wife walked in after work and slammed the door, like, well, we can talk about that tomorrow. Another time, right? It's okay, but it's important you want the other person to be at least in somewhat of a somewhat decent space. It doesn't have to wait for things to be perfect, but we want them to be hopefully in like somewhat of a calmer space. The second one, which is just as and even more important, is what am I feeling right now? Because when I'm amped up, again, I can go about it in different ways. I can do dialogue, I can do debate, I can do destruction, right? And if I'm in the mode of destruction, if this is a relationship that I actually want to maintain, I probably don't want to have this conversation right now. All right. Third, how does the environment impact this conversation? Again, the best way, if you're having challenging types of things, the best way to do it is one-on-one, not in front of others, right? Because egos, pride, and things like that come into play because I'm talking with you, but I'm also thinking about how I'm being perceived by everybody else, right? So lots of times in a one-on-one situation, things can be navigated much differently than in a crowd. Fourth, is it a relatively calm time to start the conversation? Again, I said relatively calm, again, not perfect, right? It's good enough. It's as good as it's gonna get, all right? And then the last thing is, what's the best way to initiate with this person? It's different for different people. For some of us, it may be meeting for coffee. For somebody else, it may be, hey, I'm gonna have a conversation at some place that is comfortable for them. Or I'm gonna have this place that's comfortable for me. Again, depending on the dynamics. Does that make sense? All right.
You want to do the video?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yes, we'll send that to them.
Okay.
We'll send that to everybody.
Okay.
I didn't, so Go to the, yeah.
Go to the net.
Yes, so we got, so yeah, there's a video that I will show you all, and I will make sure everybody, we want everybody to get all the slides and everything anyway. But it talks about putting some of these things in play, but it's also about even how to regulate yourself within conversations. And sometimes I gotta notice what's happening in my body. And I'm starting to tense up, and I'm starting to get here, or whatever else like that.
Yeah.
You know, Shay was talking about those things, the lizard brain and everything else like that. You know, like we talk about, like, I want to get my brain in a centered way. That lizard brain is what's underneath, right? The learning happens here. That's why we call it blowing your top.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm here, learning doesn't happen. And when I work with teachers, we talk about this. Like kids, in order for them to learn, we have to help their brains be in a centered, grounded kind of place. Otherwise, it's just wah, 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 wah. Right? And so first I want to make sure I'm in a grounded space, but also our energy, we have energy exchange lots of times. You know, and I can feel serenity. Oh, she's coming to me. Oh, that's all right, cool. I'm ready. I'm ready for my counter.
She does that.
I'm glad you finally acknowledged that. Except for Shay, that's for Shay.
Situation, right?
Yeah.
Shay, I think Shay just takes it. You know, that's part of the internal process, man. It happens. We all been there. So what we're gonna do very quickly before we close out is we're gonna do a grounding exercise. All right. And it's something, it's gonna be very something basic. There's different things I can show you all, but something you can do just literally in your own seat, right? So what I want you to do is just kind of find a position that's comfortable for you. Kind of just keep shoulders loose, you know, your head. And what we're gonna do is just some basic tapping. And so what you're gonna do, again, we're all just kind of starting right here. We're gonna take a couple of breaths, but when we start to do the tapping, I'll tell you where. We're gonna only do 2 places tonight. You kind of hold your hands like this in a way. And when you do it, the first place we'll do it is right kind of near our collarbone, right just above it. And then the next place we'll do it, and I'm gonna tell you this, we haven't started yet, is right here, right by your temple, okay? All right, so first thing we're gonna do is, what's that?
Overachievers.
Yeah, no, it's good. I like it. I want to pass the test.
Yes.
A plus.
All right, so if you're comfortable, close your eyes. If you're not comfortable with that, you just find something soft to focus on in the room. You're first going to take just a couple of breaths, kind of go in through your nose like you're smelling the rose. Go out through your mouth. One more time, we go in through your nose like you're smelling the rose. Blow out through your mouth. And take your fingers and we're just going to tap just above the collarbone with a simple 1-2 rhythm. And it's just going to be slightly firm, but not harsh. And as you tap, just want you to keep breathing in through your nose, blowing out through your mouth. Again, in through your nose, out through your mouth. You got that rhythm going. I'm just going to take that tap, take it up beside your tongue. Again, I'm just going to keep that same rhythm, that same 1-2 rhythm. Again, just take your time. We're going to take a breath in through your nose. Blowing out through your mouth. Again, we're going to go in through your nose. Blow out through your mouth. Just want you to notice what's going on in your body. Notice how your feet are in your shoes into the floor. Notice how you're resting in the chair. See if you can get your shoulders to relax a little bit. Then we're gonna take ourselves right back down above our collarbones one last time. Just doing that same 1-2 tap. And breathe in through your nose. Blow out through your mouth. Breathe in through your nose. Blow out through your mouth. Then you can stop tapping. You can rest your hands on your knees. Keep your eyes closed for a second. I just want you to repeat after me. We may not have created the challenges we have.
We may not have created the challenges we have,
But together we can face them.
but together we can face them.
Again, we may not have created the challenges that we have.
We may not have created the challenges we have,
But together we can face them.
but together we can face them.
Last one. We may not have created the challenges that we have.
We may not have created the challenges that we have,
But together we will face them.
but together we will face them.
You take one more deep breath in through your nose. Blow out hard out through your mouth. Slowly open your eyes. All right. How was that for you all? Who's ready to fight each other?
I'm tapped out.
Yeah. Well done, Paul. See, I can type 200 words a minute. No, that's not what we're doing right now. Yeah, that's not it. You're not winning. It's, Good. Well, thank you all for your time. Thank you again for committing to this work. Next week, we're actually going to go into the skills to execute the conversation. So we're actually going to talk about phrasing. We're going to talk about the things we say. We're going to do a little bit of exchange with each other and again, kind of go to the next place. All right? So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna adjust this.